Hi, I'm Rick Lobdell. Welcome to another episode of Concrete Mystique, the podcast. This show is brought to you by Epoxy Depot. Go to epoxydepotusa.com and check out all their great products. Today on the show we have Hi, welcome to Concrete Mystique, the podcast. Today, I have an interesting friend of mine, Mr. Garrett Barnes, a two-time contestant for Epoxy Floor Wars. We've gotten to know each other over the last 2 years, had a great time together. So welcome to the show. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you for having me, Rick. I really appreciate it.
It's about time, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
So the first thing I always start with, just out of curiosity, is when did we first meet? Was it last year at Epoxy Floor Wars, or had you met me before?
No, it was Epoxy Floor Wars that I had met you. You were actually doing a thing at Decocrete, like I think it was like a year prior, maybe it was like 18 months prior to Epoxy Floor Wars, and I really wanted to attend it, but there were some things that got tied up in my schedule with work that there was virtually no way for me to be able to make it, and I was kind of let down because like I followed your work for a long time. Like, you know, you're notorious for your engraving and stuff like that. And, you know, that's something that I really like to, you know, intricate into projects and stuff like that. So like I wanted to meet you prior to, and then like I was kind of, like I said, I was let down. But then once I found out that, you know, I was on Epoxy Floor Wars, and then I found out Rick Lobdell was a judge on it. I'm like, this is badass. Like, I finally get to meet him, and he gets to judge my work.
Yeah, that was a hard thing to do, I've got to say. I felt for the judges this year not being one, because it's a lot to ask for. It's nerve-wracking to make that decision between who wins and who loses, and it's not like someone, you know, slaughters the other one. They're close races. There's no way that it's going to be like a one-sided victory. It's going to be close. So it is really hard to judge that.
Right. Like it was like the first year it was really close. And I'll tell you what, going back the second time, all the critiquing that the judges from season one did and said about, wearing booties on the floor, stepping off the floor from spikes onto concrete. Like, yeah, it's a competition, but we got to treat that like that's $1 million homeowner's home. And you're stepping onto concrete that we're not coating, you know, because you know as well as I do, I mean, probably earlier in the years that, you know, a bucket might have been handed off and there might not have been plastic down and a little tiny drip got on their concrete. And, you know, they're like, well, what are we going to do here? You know, they're expecting $500, $1,000 knocked off their bill because their concrete wasn't like that prior to us arriving. So,
Yeah.
you know, so certain things, that was like one thing whenever I had met Andrew, because I've never met Andrew a day in my life prior to. I think we followed each other on social media whenever he transferred from Easy Concrete to Epoxy Depot. But like, yeah, I told him, I was like, look, like there's some stuff that we have to sit down and talk about that a lot of, you know, you guys not being and participating last year, that there's things that you wouldn't think that we need to do.
That's an interesting point, because you had that experience. I didn't really think about that. That's an interesting way to look at it, because you knew our expectation, because we're hardcore. We're not messing around. Especially you saw how I'm not messing around. I mean, everybody was like, dude, you were really rude to everybody at that safety conversation and that Wednesday night, you know, and I was like, well, I have to be. You know, I have to be very serious about this stuff.
Well, it's not, I wouldn't say, some people would take it as being rude, you know, but if you're in the industry and you live it and, you know,
or more mean than rude, but yeah.
Exactly, you know, shit rolls downhill. So it's unfortunate, but them safety precautions, I bet you if OSHA's on your job, you're going to do A, B, and C. You're not going to do.
Not only that, but ASCC before, like I did an article about how to acid stain a border, basically. And I had all these photos of me from a video I did. So I filmed a video and gave a play-by-play of how to use acid stain with the brush. And then I took that film, took photographs out of the film, wrote an article about it, published it in Concrete Decor magazine. And a week later, ASCC's director calls me and she's like, "Hey, love this article that they wrote about you, or that you wrote, but just want to point out that you didn't do like all these things safe wise." And I was like, "I can't." And she's like, "What do you mean?" And I said, "I was filming a video. I can't talk with the dust mask on and eyeglasses on and hard hat on." And, I was like, they wouldn't be able to hear what I was saying. So I was like, I couldn't do it on that. I understand your point and I agree with you, but that was one of those moments where there was no alternative for me. And she was just like, "Well, you should have just stopped and taken photos of you in the process with all your gear on." And I'm like, how do you stop in the middle of a video? But I understood their point, like the world is watching, and it's important to understand that if you're representing this industry and you're becoming this name in this industry, you have to take it upon yourself to make sure that the world sees you do the right thing all the time, no matter what it means. And I agree 100%, but I was like, but in this instance, there was no other way, because you didn't understand that it was from a video. You didn't click the link in the end of the article where there's a link to go to the video. You didn't click that link to see why. You just saw the photos and was like, you should have done this better. And I'm not arguing with her. I'm not disagreeing with her. I just said there was no other way for me to do this. And that's tough.
Right.
And, even as the safety director for the show, I was very much like, there's certain things I'm not going to make you do. I'm not making you wear hard hats. I'm not making you wear safety vests. That would be ridiculous. There's no reason for that. Not ridiculous like you shouldn't be doing it, but because it will take away from the show. You wouldn't know who's who. Everybody would look the same.
Right. Exactly.
We got to see a little bit of character. So the one thing I noticed on the show too from you this year specifically, because last year being a judge, yes, we stood right beside you guys sometimes, but a lot of times but a lot of it was we weren't really hearing what you guys were saying all the time. And this time I didn't really either. Let me take that back. I really didn't hear that much either, but because I was a commentator, I've been watching all the video, going back and critiquing myself or making notes about how I can do this better possibly and things like that. And I heard you talking with Andrew, and man, you really were like aggressive with him of like, we got to do this. This guy's not doing this right. Like you were really very involved and not just like sitting back and going, what do you want me to do? You were very much in his face like, hey, pay attention to this. Did I catch that, or was I wrong on that?
Yeah, you were definitely correct. So last year, whenever I was accepted onto the show, us getting accepted onto that, it's put your money where your mouth is. I took $2,500, which is not much money, but to some people it is. And I took $2,500 of money that I worked for to put up to represent myself. And I love Brian Bourne, great dude. I could never say anything negative about him, but the only thing that I didn't like is like I'm known for my metallic epoxy, my wood plank overlays, my flagstone. Like I really tightened that stuff up over the years. And
that's right. It was during the overlay that I heard you getting on him about that. That's right. Yeah, it was during that point on this one.
Yeah, and it was like if you look back at the footage from last year, I'm doing wood plank overlay and I'm being told that I'm doing it wrong and I'm getting yelled at. And everything had to be a certain way. It was his way. There was no what can I say? It was his layout. And I understand that. You're the captain, you got a lot of pressure, you want this thing to be perfect. So I can understand that. But whenever I went back this year and I met with Andrew, I told him, I said, look, once we find out what these categories are that we are doing, I honestly feel collectively as a team, we all need to take a sketch pad and we need to spend 10 minutes and we need to draw a mock-up of what we think the layout should be. So we did that and we brought all our pieces of paper together. Everybody but me had wood plank going on the corners, and inside that wood plank was your four-color broadcast flake with that dimensions. So I was like, that would look badass. I said, but do you want one nightmare or do you want four nightmares? Because if we have to do that flake on all four corners, that's nightmares that we have to figure out them dimensions and tape everything out and pull all that stuff. And it's going to be very critical. If we had time, yes, it would be awesome. We could figure it out. I said, but we don't got the time. We have to think logically. We only have maybe a total of 18 hours throughout these 2.5 days in
Right.
order to get this done. And like whenever I came back, I told Andrew, I said, look, you're the captain, you're the boss, I'll listen to anything that you say. I said, but I am going to be an open mouth and I expect you to take in strategy and feedback because I experienced this stuff last year and me losing. I mean, I put my blood, sweat, and tears as everybody did. But like I was like really let down that we lost, and I understand there always got to be a winner and there always got to be a loser. But I went back with
And it was
vengeance
so
this year.
close. And it was so
Yes.
close. I mean, you know, the one challenge. I mean, literally, you lost by one challenge almost. It was that close. It's insane.
And you know
how
what's
close
even
it was.
crazy? You know what's crazy about that? The first challenge, I knew that it was the code based stuff. Soon as they announced everybody to go over, I kind of like looked over and I seen all the code base tools out. And I looked at Andrew and I said, dude, do not pick me for code base. I've never done it. And I was like, they got a bucket over there and I have no clue what they're doing. We get over there and Steven was like, who are you picking, Andrew? He's like, Garrett. I'm like, dude, I've never did this. So that was the first time that I've ever touched a cove trial or any type of cove material ever
Oh,
in my life.
that
And that
explains
was
so
that
much.
was the challenge. That was the challenge we lost. We won the
Yes.
rest of them.
That's a very interesting point. I didn't think about that. Wow. Yeah, that's a really cool. That sucks. That sucks.
Yeah, yes. Because I was like, if it's cove, dude. I was like, I'll do the engraving, I'll do the overlay, I'll do the staining. I said, if you really want me to do the cove, I will. I said, but I'm telling you, I've never did a half a linear foot of cove, let alone around a bucket. I
And
was like,
clearly, Nick had
so
done it before because he finished with a minute left and just walked off, and he didn't even have it perfect.
right. Right. And I was like, so what they told me to how to do it, that was the first time I ever did it. They said spray
Wow.
primer and every time you take your trowel off, spray, and I'm sitting there thinking like I got cameras in my face and I look like a clown because I've never did this before. But I was just rolling with the punches. It is what it is. There's got to be something for TV.
Now, could you hear anything that I was saying half the time, or you guys were just in your own world?
We were no. Whenever I think it was the first day, maybe the first couple hours, I could hear you over the speakers, but then something changed to
At
where
the end of
whenever
Friday,
you
they
were
did that to
talking,
me. No, at the end of Friday, they took my mic from me because the video guys had to go do another project. And I was like, well, what do I do now? So then they gave me another mic from the audio guys that was over the speaker and private at the same time for YouTube. And I was like,
oh, okay.
I don't think this is a good idea. They wanted me to do that in the beginning. The whole time they wanted me to be on the loudspeakers. And I was like, I don't think these guys are going to want to like what I have to say at all.
No, no, and I think that it made it even more interesting that we couldn't hear you because just knowing the person that you are and you know uh it's like looking at an awkward dimension. You don't know what's going on, and while we're working and we see you and Matt Schrader on the sidelines and you guys are talking and you're pointing at stuff, not knowing, and just the whole question of curiosity, like what are they talking about? And then it makes me second guess and I'm looking where you're pointing like what the hell's going on over here, like is there something wrong, is there something that needs attention? And no, it really broadened the horizons and opened up the blinders a little bit, by it being that way. I thought that was really good because like whenever I was polishing, I couldn't hear anything you were saying,
Oh, of
you
course
know?
not, because yeah, you were in your own little world, and we talked a lot about you polishing, not just you, but both you and Brad, because it was so interesting how different both of you did it. And like we talked about before the end of it, you could see how much better your polish was. Now he did walk into it after the first day and started all over the second day, so he was a little bit behind. But
Well,
at the same time, go ahead.
no, go ahead. Go ahead at the same
I was just
time.
going to say, but at the same time, you were rocking it. I mean, and it was so interesting to like how you put the weight on it, like how you utilize the ability that you didn't need any help because the red team or the orange team in the beginning of it, they had two guys. When Corey was doing it, they had one guy pushing down on the machine and the other guy moving the machine. And they were wasting time on it. And they were having issues where you were just like, screw this. I'm doing it by myself. Get out of my way. I'm just going to put a bunch of bags on top of it and make my own weight. And it worked great.
Right.
It was a really interesting difference of how the two sides were doing it.
The only challenge that I ran into with the polish is I think you're going to be in agreement with me. I categorize this like if we're staining an overlay and you're doing red brown, I am not going to follow you with a brush with red brown because our brush strokes are going to be different. Our technique is different. Okay, so whenever we first started doing this, Andrew had Tyler. I initially ground it and did the first metal cut. Tyler then grout coated, and then I went to Andrew and said, "Look, I'm not gonna do this back and forth, me and him, me and him." I said, "One person needs to polish this floor. It doesn't need to go back and forth." And the same thing with the taping out of the 4 broadcast flake for the geometrical, flake. I said, whoever is taping that out, when they're done with their 15 minutes on the floor, they have 15 minutes on the sideline to strategize their next step versus us coming in and messing something up and it being all out of whack. Keep your mind on that one project, and too many hands in the pot is just not good. It's not always good.
That is something we mentioned on Saturday that we were like, because actually Aaron brought it to my attention. He came over privately and was like, "Hey, have you noticed or said anything about the fact that Andrew's team is only doing their job and not like multitasking everybody's job? Whereas the orange team, every time they switched, they jumped back in exactly where they were at and took over that role instead of doing their own thing when it was their time, except for Brad, of course, polishing because that's all he knew how to do or that's what he was there for." And I was like, that's an interesting observation. So Saturday we brought it up while we were watching you guys, and it's a very interesting point that you guys did that. Now, with that said, watching you guys tape that 3D pattern was one of the most comical things I've got to experience in a while. It was almost as bad as Isaiah last year, redoing it 4 times, 5 times. It was so funny because I was like, all you have to do is just step back and look at your lines and you're going to see how far off you are. It wasn't complicated.
Right.
The design was complicated, but the problem that they were having, all they had to do was just step back. But one of the hardest parts for you guys is you have no room to step back. So me as the observer standing back there, looking at you while you're doing it, I'm like, I see the lines that are, not you, but I mean the guy that was doing it, I see the lines that are so far off. But you guys are on top of it, not paying attention to that, thinking you got it right. And I'm just laughing the whole time going, you guys are so far off, you have no idea. How you guys pulled that off, I still don't understand.
Well, I made a suggestion. I said, you guys need to find center. You got to find your center. You got to find your center to it. And once you find your center, everything else is just going to flow. Like once you get that center and you get that first row laid out, everything else off that is just running lines. And then, cutting out in between, which, I mean, they nailed it. They got it. And, I was really impressed. And, towards the end of it, the night before, the last night, I was in my head and it was like 3:34 in the morning. And I was like, what are we going to do in between? And I knew that they didn't give us yellow epoxy, but I knew we had gold for our metallic. So it was kind of ballsy, but I'm sitting there thinking like, okay, it's going to be crunch time tomorrow. So to take material and take a detail brush and go along them lines, metallic, it's pretty much semi-translucent unless it's built up. So you can't stretch it thin. It has to be stretched thick in order for it to achieve that, like that.
Actually,
that
I disagree. I can
color.
show you how to do that without doing all that. Water-based
Really?
epoxy will do it. Yeah. You just switch to water-based
You said
epoxy.
water-based epoxy?
Yeah. You add the powder to the water-based epoxy and you do the exact same thing and it will be dark. It'll be as solid as you can be with the powder. It works great. I do it all the time in my cut lines because you've seen all my engraving. I've had a few of them and I've learned the hard way where I've tried to do exactly what you guys did. And the problem is that, not on that project, but on a project I've done where they're so big, like the once the metallic starts to set up, you get ahead of yourself too far and stuff like that. So I learned to just take water-based and just fill it because what happens is then you don't actually see the full, it's not filled all the way up. It's just inside of it. And then when you clear coat over top of it, it fills it in and it looks like it's solid brass or whatever color it is all the way through. It's fake. But it works fantastic every single time. And it's even brighter because of the water-based.
Right. Yeah, that is brilliant. But like me stewing that night, I was like, I have one of them memories that like if I look in a pack out or I look in a gang box, like a day later, like I can remember what's in there. And I was like, hey, we have these condiment bottles that are clear. If we make a V groove, we can just fill them jugs with
would have done the same thing. Correct.
And we can just squirt it. I was like, you're going to control it. And I was like, at the end of the day, we're going to innovate engraving into it. And we kind of thought outside the box and we went one extra step. I was like, and then literally the last power hour, Tyler was like, we don't got time to do it. We don't got time to do it. We're just going to leave it alone. And I was like, no, we're going to do it. Like, we have to do it. Like, if we don't do this, like, we're going to lose. Like, them lines were not
would agree
clean
with
enough.
you. So what you didn't know throughout that moment is Orange had the same idea, but they couldn't get to it.
What happened?
So we heard them talk about it, and then we saw you do it. That's what was interesting.
So this is what happened. The day that we were pre-gaming, before the show even started, that was already planned for us to do. Okay? And somebody said something to somebody else, and then all of a sudden they were doing it. So we had already planned to do it the day before, but somebody let the cat out of the bag to somebody, and somebody had said it.
Maybe the way that I heard it was more arbitrary of like, wouldn't it be cool if we could do this? I wonder if the other team's thinking that. That's what I heard.
Yeah.
Because I heard them specifically say that.
Yeah, I mean that makes sense. I mean, they did have access to the same metallic powders that we did because they had to have what we had.
So what's interesting though, wasn't the color orange? Or was it actually gold? It looked more orange to me now. Again, I'm colorblind, so what do I know? But
so the color was actually labeled, I believe, bright gold. But like,
because the reason why I'm asking is I thought it was interesting that you did orange against the orange team. Like I thought it was like a little jab of like we're going to use your own color against you.
No. The only jab against them was the bird in the tree named Brian.
I do have to ask you about that too. Well, the other thing too is you guys had a more interesting design overall because of the mistake that Brian made, which is it is what it is. But man, it killed me, and I know it killed you too because I heard you say it about how all the color was the same, and I was like, what are you guys thinking? And I really thought you had a chance to lose because of that alone, and I thought that the coating the cut lines made up for it because your design was better. The filling of the lines was awesome. You took it a step farther, but all your wood and stone was exactly the same color. It was like, what happened? That was so weird.
Yeah, that was one thing that I said, because we all stayed in Airbnb, everybody but Dustin. The whole team stayed at one Airbnb. So, of course, I was the first one up. And, after everybody came out of their rooms and we were like, had our luggage bags ready to put in our trucks and stuff and head out to meet at the limo, That was one thing that I said. I'm like, look at these reference photos. I said, these judges are going to crush us. I said, we need to have variation in the color of the stones, the variation in the wood. I mean, even the day before, whenever we textured the concrete, like I spread it out and then my 15 minutes was up. So Dustin came in and textured it. And I was trying to stand beside him and, like, Dustin is awesome at what he does, but I was trying to, tell him, like, look, it's got to be like the texture in the photos. So,
Not
like,
only that, but the texture on the other side. I remember you saying that, like they're not matching. And I heard you
right,
because I have been listening back on it, like because I have a meeting tomorrow. Not well, doesn't matter when this video comes out, but I have a meeting with them about like a feedback and just an overlook of what we did and advice for where we're going to go next. And so I've been listening as much as I can, and I literally heard you not arguing or anything like that in a positive way, going, "Look, guys, they don't match. They've got to match. The lines don't match. The textures don't match. You got one guy doing this. You got one guy doing this. It's not making any sense. We've got to come together somehow." And in the middle of it,
right,
I'm watching Dustin literally doing that, and what he was doing looked awesome. It totally looked awesome.
right,
But it wasn't the same
right.
as the other side of the room.
Right, exactly, and that's what I said. I said, you can't, like whoever's texturing needs to texture both
Yep.
sides,
Yep.
and
Same
then
thing with the
like
stone
I
too.
spread, yeah, like I spread the concrete for the stone. Dustin came in and textured it, and whenever I was getting back in before they did the switch, I had said to Andrew, I said, them textures on that stone need to be corrected. It looks like you took a sponge roller and rolled over it. Now,
Which you
could it
did.
have been a texture for some type of stone? Yes, it could have been, but not specifically the stone that was in our reference photos that we had to
And the,
replicate.
and
So,
the interesting thing to that too is that the orange team's stone looked better because they had all the different colors that they needed. And I think
correct,
they
correct.
almost won because between the stone and I thought that their metallic looked better. It's too bad. And I asked Brian about it a little bit, but it's too bad that they had to put so much overlay out there to not have enough metallic because their metallic looked awesome and their stones looked better
Right.
because they looked more accurate to the photo. And I was like, man, I think that they actually might have pulled this off at the last second and sucker punched you guys almost.
Right.
And you're lucky that you made it through it because they were this close. If they had had one more hour, I think you guys might have lost. It was close.
Right. Like, yeah, that's one thing. Their color was on, but their texture and shape of the stone wasn't on. So it was like reverse for us. Our shape was more natural, our texture was spot on, but our color wasn't. But no, you're definitely right. And just like, for instance, like the judges made a good point. Like there was an area where somebody stepped in the overlay and they never stained it. And then they
Mm-hmm.
sealed it. And then the
Yep.
person that did the metallic epoxy didn't even attempt to try to cover it up with epoxy. So, that was a low blow too. And then another thing that, was something that, being that the floor was already ground prior to our arrival, they didn't prep their floor.
Right.
So
Right.
that was a major blow too. I don't even know what that point, deduction would have been because I don't know what the point system is based off the judges, but I'm sure that it was rather large.
Well, that was the hardest thing last year too. To your same point, was the prep because there was a lot of mistakes on the prep last year too, like that. We saw Isaiah do some of that similar stuff where he just went right over the area and like maybe prepped some of it, but then the next day when he went to like overlay, didn't re-prep and stuff like that. And we were shocked at how well some of it bonded and things like that. Brian or Steven told me that it was a pain in the ass to get all that off of there for the next season. And I was like,
Yeah,
well, that's good to know because it looked like it wasn't going to bond at all. And so we
yeah,
went round and round about all that. We
the
did.
owner that actually the owner of the company that owns Just Grind It, he actually purchased some equipment off me. I had an old I had like it was like a 2013 or 14 HTC 800 classic electric grinder, and he bought that in a Sace back off me probably about a month and a half ago. And whenever I took it out and delivered it to him in my box truck, he was like, "Hey, I just want to let you guys know them coatings that you guys had from Epoxy Floor Wars Season 1 them things were on there. He said, "Man, we had to bust out some big equipment to get that stuff off." And
Yeah.
I'm like, good. I'm like, that's good. That just shows you, what a quality product and you know, quality install rushed, for
Right.
the
That's a good
amount of
point.
time that we had.
Especially when you're adding, accelerators to everything you're doing. That's a very good point. That's a really good testament to coatings in general, because one of the things I talk to people about all the time is they're always sitting there going, well, this coating right here, this 100% solid epoxy doesn't dry for 6 hours. So obviously it's going to soak into the concrete farther because it takes longer for it to dry, whereas this polyaspartic over here dries in an hour. So clearly this can't soak in as much. And I'm like, that doesn't make any sense. It's not like it keeps going down into the concrete. It's not like it soaks 4 inches into the concrete. It goes into the
Right,
pores at the very surface and it stops and it just sits there. So yes, if a
right,
coating dries in like 5 seconds or 5 minutes, maybe it's a little fast. But what's the difference between 30 minutes and 8 hours? Is there really a difference at all? It should all still be bonding at
right.
that point because it's had enough time to soak into the pores. That's all that matters.
Right, absolutely, absolutely. I mean, a lot of installers, obviously, as well as I do, the highest grit that you can use for installs would be 30 grit. I like to prep all my floors with 15 grit diamonds. I like to go as low as possible, as aggressive as possible. You know, because sometimes you got them floors where I've done a 30 grit grind and it had issues, and once I had one issue with one job that was, you could see the scratch pattern, where at the bottom of the coating, like there was more than enough scratch pattern. But this concrete, man, once I hit it with some 15 grit diamonds, it was a wrap. That floor never had an adhesion problem ever again. um, but yeah, I mean, yeah, I agree with you wholeheartedly. Whether it's a 6 hour cure or a 2 hour cure, it's gonna stop. It's not a penetrating epoxy to where it
No.
soaks down it.
No, in fact, I just taught a class today, and the guy told me he was talking to some other company about their product, and they said that whatever product they had merges with the surface of the concrete. And I was like, what? Like, there's no such thing. No matter how you look at this, every coating you put down is a sheet of plastic. Overlay, maybe I might talk about that depending on the overlay, but a coating does not merge with the surface of the concrete. It soaks into the pores and grabs a hold of the texture. There's no
Correct.
merging with the surface. Like, I've never heard of that term before. And I'm like, I don't know. That guy's pulling, that's a weird way to sell something.
Right. Correct. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. It definitely is. Like, yeah. Yeah. I definitely don't see anything merging in. Um, I actually just came off of. I wrapped it up last night. A 5,300 square
I know I
foot
was going to ask you
dom.
about that because you've been sending me pictures. Okay.
Yeah.
So let's switch to that. So give me a second. First of all, what's the name of your company again?
Grind and Shine LLC.
And you are where at again?
I am
We're,
I am Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania.
you're in Pittsburgh. Okay. Sorry, I hate the Steelers.
Yeah,
I'm a
no, it's
Brown
okay.
I'm a Browns fan. I lived an hour and a half from you. I grew up in Northeast Ohio, and I was exactly an hour and a half to Cleveland and an hour and a half to Pittsburgh. So I would
Smack
fly
dab in
out
the
of
middle.
Pittsburgh, but I would rather go to Cleveland if I could, kind of thing.
Right.
Anyway, middle of nowhere in between all that. And you have to drive by my house to go to the Decocrete show, by the way. You have to literally drive right by my house to get there. As
Oh,
funny as that
okay.
is.
Yeah.
Okay, so yeah, you sent me these pictures a couple days ago that you were doing 5,300 square feet of flake by yourself.
Yeah.
How?
I
How?
actually. So the first day, my kids go to school at like 9 a.m. So the first day, me and my fiance, we went and I had a little bit of assistance with the prep with her. Um, and I had her running the grinder for a little bit, and there was some LVT that I had to rip up in the bathroom in the one room. Once I got that stuff ripped out, I just grabbed the grinder and I just went to town. I had it all completely ground and cleaned in about 10 hours, and then we actually we actually got the kids, got them situated, got my one son to work. He works at Burger King, and then I took the kids, my 6-year-old daughter and 11-year-old son, to the job site, and I had them mixing, and I dumped, spread, and I was doing probably about 600 to 900 square foot at a time. I would hurry up and get it stretched, back rolled, flake. I had my kids, filling buckets of flake, and I was just grabbing them and going. And then, it got time to where, all right, it's bedtime. Kids got to go to bed. So we got them situated and home, and I called one of the guys. Me and my fiance, we have a sober living house that is designed for men that are getting out of prison or a rehab or a halfway house, and it houses 7 individuals. And I contacted one of the gentlemen that's been there for about a year and was like, "Hey, you want to run a mixer for a little bit? That's all you got to do is just run a mixer and hand me buckets. That's all, and help me with cleanup." And he came over and we banged the rest of the. It was 4,000 square foot out. We did 1,300 square foot with the kids, and then me and my guy, we ran the 14,000 or 4,000 square foot out, and then we wrapped it up. Went back the next day, and I had one person. I sent him out to vac because obviously that initial vac you could recycle some of that flake. And then soon as he got, about 2,000 square foot done, I grabbed a 24-inch scraper and I just started going up and down every single direction, the whole entire building. And then I had him. At the very end, I ran to Home Depot because I have these great blowers, but they're battery powered, and they're 6 batteries. They're supposed to last an hour and a half, 2 hours. A battery would last like 15 minutes, and you know as well as I do, you're on 5,300 square foot. That's big. So I
Yeah,
ran
right.
to Home Depot. I spent about $450 on a backpack two-stroke blower, and I went there. I blew all the loose debris that was left over from the scraping all along one wall. That way, my guy could just run down that perimeter wall with the vac system, get all
Sure.
that debris, and boom, it was done. And then we just top coated it. I got in at like 4 a.m. So it was a long 16-hour day yesterday, but
Wow. I
but
can't
we
believe you
but
did
we
that
got it
all in a
done.
day.
Literally, yeah, we got it all done that quick, and it was just like, you got to. Unfortunately, the guy that has been working for me the longest, he made a poor decision, and he was living in my sober living house, and after being sober for 14 months, he relapsed, and we got him back in treatment and everything. But you know, so it kind of gets to the point where, you know, I explain to him all the time, like, you know, I'm not afraid to do this stuff by myself. I started my business by myself, and I have no problem working. You know, that's why, like, a lot of the guys, they don't understand. Like, I don't need to be there when the prep's being done. If you're trained how to do the prep, I shouldn't have to be there. You know,
Right.
call me whenever it's as far as any installation of any type of resinous or cementitious material that's going down. I'm there to keep the quality in check. So
Sure.
any prep work, I got guys trained, but a lot of them, they don't get it. I got to go out there and get these jobs. So if I can't be at a job site and there at the same time. So a lot of them are like, "Oh, it must be nice that you don't got to do this." Well, I put my time in, but don't get it
Yeah,
twisted for
right.
1 second. I will
Right.
grab a grinder in no hurry. If my grinder goes down, I would have hand ground that 5,300 square foot. I mean, whenever
All right.
times get tight, it is what it is.
So first of all, I just want to point out that you admitted on camera and recording that you are fine with child labor.
Absolutely. Hey, gummy bears and juice boxes. That's the pay for the day.
I've been dying to say that, but I didn't want to interrupt you. Second of all, I did the same thing with all my employees too. I kept reminding them all the time, I don't need you. I want you here. I can do this by
Right.
myself if you're going to give me shit, but I want you to be here. I want you to learn. I want to be able to let you do it and walk away. But if you're going to not show up and you're going to have an attitude or you're just going to be sloppy, just remember, you can quit today. I can fire you today. I still have to show up and finish this job, and I will without you. But I want you to
Right.
realize I want you here. It's why I hired you. I'm trying to do this the right way. But if you're going to give me any issues, I'll just do it by myself. I don't need you. I want you. There's a big
Right.
difference in that
So
kind of mentality.
yeah, yep. And that's what I say. That's what I would say to them all the time. And like, this is my thing: 750 square foot garage. You or I could show up there. We could grind that thing in an hour tops. Okay. You should
It
be
might take a little
backing
longer
after an
for me.
hour. Maybe. So this is what I would do. If it would take me an hour, I would give my workers two. Okay. So, so I give them this work order. I have them go to this job site. I show up there 4.5 hours later. This man's still grinding. And I was like, "What are you doing?" He's like, "It's taking that long." And I'm like, "No, it's not. My machine it cuts 800 square foot an hour. Like I know what my machine cuts. Like you've forgotten. I've done this for 16 years now."
Right.
I was like, so like big machine, little machine. Like I know what production should be done, and I was like, I feel like you're taking advantage of me. Don't take my kindness for weakness because I was doing two or three garages in one day from start to finish, top coat, and grind one, send the crew off to the other one while I'm doing the epoxy and flakes. By the time they're
Right.
done with that one, I'm up, just a domino effect, just chasing each other. And I'm like, so, please just don't take advantage of me. So, of course, you have people, you give them an inch, they take a mile. But,
Right.
it is what it is. I guess that's the circle of life.
It's part of business. So
Yeah.
tell me about this sober house.
So, this sober house, let me give you a little bit of backstory on myself. So,
Yeah.
um, 2007, I was an apprentice doing masonry work, and the laborers got behind, and it was my day that I was on the wall laying brick, and all the other masons are yelling for mud. I'm yelling for mud. We need brick. So, me being the person that I am, I took initiative and I jumped off the wall. And, he had we were six scaffold bucks up. Each scaffold buck was 6'6". And he had the rope up for the pulley system, but he didn't have the pulley system set up. He had outriggers out. There was OSHA plank, 18-foot long, stretching across three outriggers. So I stepped on the side to the left of the middle outrigger, grabbed the rope, hooked the bucket, started pulling it up. It got caught on an X brace, so I stepped out onto the OSHA plank. Soon as I did that, an outrigger, a weld broke, and it was like a cartoon. I watched the other end of the board just literally rise up, and I was like a cartoon character. I was 43 feet in the air. I was grabbing it and just throwing it down, trying to catch the end, and I did. I caught the end of the 18-foot
Oh,
plank.
yeah, I see what you mean. Like trying to climb up it as it was sliding down.
Yes, yes. So I threw it down. The other
Sorry, I
the
don't mean to
other
laugh
end
because that's
sunk in the
crazy, but
mud. So 43 feet. I stopped at 18. And you know how like you're hanging Christmas lights and you're on a ladder and you like fall away from the house, but you're trying to throw your weight back towards the house. So the way that it hit in the mud, I was trying to make me fall towards the scaffolding so I could grab onto something. Well,
right.
the way the angle of the wood was, I was going towards the mixer. The cage was open. Mixer blades were going. So right at the last second, I let go with one hand and kept one hand on it. I reached out, I pushed off the mixer, and I landed on a pallet of concrete. And I jumped up immediately, and everybody's looking down 43 feet up in the air. They're like, "Are you okay?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I just hit my funny bone. My whole left arm was all tingly." And then my boss climbed down, and he was like, "Dude, your arm is shaped like a Z." he's like, I can see it through your thermal. So they took a razor knife and cut my thermal open. And so all the skin from my left elbow to my left wrist was all bunched up, like it was all wrinkled. And
Ouch.
bone was almost poking through the skin. So they took me to the hospital, life flighted me to Allegheny General Hospital, and my wrist was broken into 19 pieces, and they ended up doing reconstructive surgery on my wrist and my face. Um, and I was prescribed a strong opiate painkiller, and I was on it for 3 years. And a lot of people along the way were warning me, hey, be careful, them things are addictive. And there's my naive self saying, no, a doctor gave this to me, I'm okay. And I never went through withdrawal because I always had pain pills. So, and I never like abused them or anything. I just took them as needed. So I never went through a withdrawal symptom. And I ended up becoming addicted to pain pills. And I went the one day I went to the doctor, and they're like, "No more. We're not giving you no more." And they just yanked me off of them. And I started going through withdrawal. So now you got a person that's going through withdrawal. I started resorting to purchasing them off the streets, and then I started getting in trouble. Uh, and between the time of my addiction, which, I would say started from the time that I took them in 2007 until from '07 until current day today, I've easily spent almost 9 years of my life in prison.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I would go to jail. I would get out. I would do good. Um, I would try to get my kids back in my life because I was married at the time and had when we split up, the one kid was 15 months, the other one was 3 years old, and she used them against me as pawns and would never let me see them. And I would start doing good and buy them school clothes, and she would just drag that carrot along, and then all of a sudden she'd be like, nope, you're not seeing them, they don't want nothing to do with you. And I would use that as an escape, and I would pick back up, and I did that for years. And then in 2016, I got in a program called Drug Court, and that's whenever I met my fiance, and I that's whenever I got sober, and I ended up I had another chance at life. We ended up, she got pregnant and she lost it at 12 weeks, and then that crushed us because she ended up losing the baby, and then had a scheduled DNC, and then before the DNC occurred, the baby passed in the tub. And so had a tiny 12-week-old fetus at home, and that was devastating. So she didn't even
Yeah,
want to
absolutely.
try to get pregnant, and then she ended up getting pregnant with my daughter, which is 6 now, and she was born 2.5 months early. And she was in the NICU for about 9 weeks. And what's it called, I ran into somebody at the casino, and they threw a big bag of pills on my lap. And I started taking them, thinking, okay, it's been 2.5, 3 years. I've been sober. I could take a couple pills. That lasted a couple months, and then I went to prison for, I went to the state penitentiary for about 18 months. And then that's whenever I came up with Grind and Shine LLC. I came up with
Wow.
the whole thing, the name, the plan, everything. As soon as I hit the ground, it was all about action. A lot of people talk, and there's no action behind it. And as soon as I came home, I mean, I was working out of the trunk of a car, renting grinders, hand grinding stuff until I could build capital up. And then after I came home from state prison, I got my stuff together and started my business. And after a certain period of time of sobriety, what better way to give back would be to helping people that were in the same situation as me. Like, I remember being behind bars, having a parole plan approved, but I needed an address to go to, or they wanted me to go to a halfway house, or they wanted me to be in somewhat of a semi-controlled environment, such as a sober living house. Like all the individuals over there that live there, it's just one big house. There's a couple single rooms, there's a couple shared rooms. There's no staff that work there. But at any given point, I can go there and be like, hey, I want to drug test you. If they deny it, it's a dirty urine. You got 15 minutes to pack your stuff. Now, if you're another resident living there and you think somebody in the house is using, you don't got to call me to come test them. There's drug tests there. They can test each other. So it's a self-governed house. Once it's up and running, it governs itself. So like I ended up, I waited until I had a group of guys in there and I sat back and I observed and looked at the ones that was not in the bullshit, not in the drama, that was serious about their recovery and serious about changing their lives. And I went over the one day, and this is like so funny. I'm 38 years old and I knocked on this grown 44-year-old man's door and opened up the door and I was like, "Hey, I need you to step out downstairs. I need to talk to you." As soon as he gets downstairs, he said, "Am I in trouble?" I'm like, "No, you're not in trouble. Do you want to be the house manager? We're going to knock 75 bucks off your rent. All you have to do is just minimize certain stuff, to where like if somebody's taking somebody's food or something, address it. I don't need to get a phone call about somebody taking somebody's Snickers bar off the counter. Like I got enough shit going on. So like by you micromanaging certain stuff, I'm gonna reward you and you're gonna get reduced rent, you're gonna have your own room, and it's gonna be a win for all of us. And yeah, I mean it's been up and running for over a year now.
Wow, that's an
And
amazing story.
yeah, it's pretty funny. I was on my way to a job about a week ago, and my phone was ringing, and on the caller ID it said Butler County Prison, and I'm like, "Hello?" And the counselor, he was like, "Mr. Barnes," he's like, "I never in my life thought I would be making this phone call, looking at this name on this paper." He said, "But I see that you have a sober living house, and I heard you got your shit together." And it was very humbling, because that individual was a correctional guard for the longest time, and he seen
Right.
me go in and out, in and out, in and out for years. And like quite frankly, the statistics in addiction are, there's three options. You're either going to end up dead, in jail, or treatment. That's it.
Yeah, right.
And
No, absolutely, man.
and that's why I completely just gave it up. And I want to give my family the life that they deserve. I want to leave a legacy behind. My daughter's 6 and she's so interested into these decorative coatings and stuff like that. You ask a typical 6-year-old, what do you want to be whenever you're older? They say a doctor, a lawyer. She'll tell you, I want to I want to run, grind, and shine polished concrete.
That's
And
awesome.
like anytime I buy work shirts and stuff, she has to have a hat, she has to have a hoodie, she has to have a shirt. She fires my guys probably about 10 times a week. Um, so she's great. She's awesome.
So,
She's
do you think that creating that house for other people is one step easier for you to make sure you never go back to that also? It's like that kind of
Yeah,
check and balance kind of thing of like, if I can, the only way for me to never go back is to make sure I'm helping somebody else never go back kind of thing.
correct. Yes. I mean, I'm seeing people fresh out of jail. Like you have to understand, Rick, at one
Because
point
you know
my
this
whole
from
life.
experience. So that's a big deal. Like you know, because you've been there. So
Yeah,
it's not like you're just telling somebody to go do their thing. You're like, literally, I'm telling you from experience how you can get out of this. You got to trust me.
yeah, I'm giving them a sense of hope. At one point, I had a black garbage bag that had everything my whole life was in one garbage bag. At one
Oh
point
yeah.
in 2015, I literally had a black garbage bag that had my whole entire life in it. And it gives these guys a sense of hope. Like a lot of three-quarter houses, if you don't have money or you can't get funding to get in, they won't let you come. I will have somebody contact me from prison or rehab, and I don't know them from a can of paint, and they don't have a job, they don't have money, they don't have nothing, and they're all stressed out and they need to find a place, and I tell them, I'm going to work with you. Let your counselor know you got a bed at my house, but this is the stipulation, Well, I'm going to give you 60 days to obtain some type of employment, whether it's coming to working for me and work your rent off, for the first month until you get on your feet. Um, but I help these guys without, that's the worst thing in the world. They get out, they don't have nothing, they don't have a phone. They burnt every
Yep.
single bridge that they have. Their family won't talk to them because they stole money off grandma or, something along them lines. So, yeah, and then they see, like, all right, you're a recovering addict that spent X amount of time behind bars and completely destroyed your life and burnt everything down, and now I'm successful, but I'm not complacent, if that makes sense to you.
Of course.
The
That's
knife
why I brought that
the
question
knife
up. Yeah.
Yeah, the knife can always be sharpened. Like, like I'm not arrogant with it. I always, try to keep my mouth shut, ears open, because you always remain teachable as long as you listen.
Yeah, that's a very good point. So, quick story for you along the same lines is my concrete guy for most of my running my company. I had he's not really an in-house concrete guy, but he did all of my concrete work. When I needed concrete poured, he poured all of it for me. And you're always still recovering, but he was not only an alcoholic, but a drug addict also. And when I first met him, he was around, I can't remember if it was 12 or 14 years sober. He's a biker, and he's in Bikers for Christ. And his whole goal was to help people recover all the time, through religion and everything else too. We talked about this stuff all the time. I met a lot of the people that were recovering because they would come help him on job sites and stuff like that too. So I was very much involved with how he was doing it, the philosophy behind it all. And we talked about it a lot because he was very focused on helping people all the time. And to him, that was his way of paying back and making sure that it never happened again. He poured most of the Bridgestone Arena for our hockey stadium and should have made $1 million off of that project. And he said, I made nothing off of it because it all went up my nose. And that's when he kind of realized something's wrong. Because if I can't walk away from this and have a house, and he still rents to this day and everything, like he messed everything up. And that's when he realized he had to get sober. And he took it super serious in a good way too. And it's been an amazing experience for me to know him all of these years and watch that growth, and mostly watch how he reacts to other people. Because like you're saying, he's very hardcore about it. This is what you do. If you don't do this, you're gone. There's no room for error. It is, you get sober or you don't. And he said the same thing. There's the three, just like you said, there's the three things. You do these three, if one of these three things is going to happen, and that's it. And either you're going to get sober or you're going to be dead. There's no in between.
Right.
And I've had so many employees of my own that have had drug addictions, and I have no problem hiring someone and giving you a chance. I'll give you a chance.
Right.
But if you don't show up, you're not going to have very many chances and stuff like that too. I went through that a lot with my employees. And a lot of people don't realize that, because they don't see that side of the story. They don't realize what we go through as business owners too, because we're in construction. 90% of construction are probably a bunch of drug addicts for the most part. We see it all the time. There's no way around that because it's hard to get good help. So you got to believe that these guys are willing to get sober. And I struggled with that all the time with my employees, and I gave them all the chances in the world. But, it is what it is. And my business partner, by the end of running my company, I brought in a business partner who had his own business too, and we merged together. And his son was a raging drug addict. I mean, raging drug addict. And it ended up costing him his life. He literally moved away 2 hours away and decided that was more important. And he's no longer with us because of it. Like you said, that literally is truly what happened to him. He went into He went to jail for like 2 years, came back out, went right back to it. They tried everything they could to try to convince him otherwise, and he was just like tough, and he went down that path, and he's no longer here because of it.
Yeah, I mean, it's terrible. I mean, the grips of addiction, I mean, like, you have to really want it, and some people
You
just,
do.
can't get away from it. And just like, you said about giving people chances, like, there's a designated gas station that I typically go to, like, whenever I get fuel for my trucks, or you know and there was multiple times in one week that I pulled up, and there was this homeless individual that kept coming up to me trying to panhandle money off me, and every time I would just tell him no. So the one night I was there, I had about 3,800 square foot of concrete, uh, uh, an epoxy flake system, and my guy called in sick. And I go to this gas station to get gas, and the kid comes up to me again asking me for money. And I was like, you know what? I said, I won't give you money. I said, but I'll give you an opportunity to make some money. I said, do you want to work? And he's like, yeah. And I'm like, okay, I got to run to my shop real quick, and I got to grab some materials. I said, you're in sandals right now. Go get a long sleeve shirt. I said, don't worry about safety glasses or gloves, and get some shoes covering up them toes. I'll be back here in 20 minutes. If you're not here, I'm leaving. I said, so I came back 20 minutes later. He was there. So amongst the hours of us working together, talking, I'm kind of picking his brain, seeing where he's at mentally, as far as, like, see if he has a drug addiction. And he did. And, I tried to not preach to him, but just tell him, like, hey, man, like, look, I got a sober living house. Like, I got some connections with some treatment facilities. I can make a phone call and get you in treatment, and I'll let you come to my sober living house, and I'll give you a job whenever you get out and help you get on your feet. And, he was like, all right, yeah, that sounds great. And he was supposed to meet with me the next day, and he went rogue. And, never seen him since. But it's just funny how God puts people in your place, puts people at a certain place at a certain point in time whenever you need it. Like, my guy called off work, and then, I kind of was ignorant to the kid the prior 3 times whenever he asked me
Right.
money, because I felt like it was a nuisance. But then I had to
Right.
bring myself back down, and I was like, wait a second. I was at that point at one point almost being homeless. And that's whenever I'm like, you know what? Something told me, ask him if he wants to work. If he wants to work for money, I respect that.
Of
And,
course.
he did, and he was a great worker, for somebody never doing any type of that work at all. He listened, and he did what he was told. And it was pretty good. It was good.
That's awesome, man. That's a story I did not expect, which is the point to what I like to do with this podcast. This isn't about, let's talk about your business plan and how you run your company. It is, who are you? And let's get to know you.
Right.
And clearly I just got to know a lot about you that I did not expect at all. And then that's
Right.
amazing, man. I really appreciate you telling me that story.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I appreciate you listening. It's always a pleasure. Like, believe it or not, like, a lot of my homeowners, I'm very open with. I tell them how I changed my life, and I know that some people hear the word prison, or drugs or something like that. They're very judgmental, but me being the person that I am today, like, I have nothing to hide. I'm an open book.
It's interesting you say that too, because another point to that is tattoos, and you have a lot of tattoos too. And I had an employee that had tattoos all over his neck, and he got them when he was 18. Wasn't, 19, I think. And he was like, yeah, I was stupid. I wish I could get rid of them now. He was in his 30s at the time when I was working with him. And I felt, if you got to know him, he's an incredible individual, the nicest guy in the whole world. And I would have to preemptively tell my clients, hey, just to let you know, when this guy shows up, he's got tattoos all over himself. Don't be scared, I had to do that because my clients are very wealthy. They don't see that kind of stuff very often. They don't trust people. And I had to tell them, I promise you, once this guy starts talking to you, you're going to forget about all of that. And they did. It worked great.
Right.
There was no problem. But I had to preemptively warn them, because if I didn't, I did get a call and go like, what's with this guy? Trust me, everything's fine. There's nothing wrong with him. It's just he made a mistake when he was 19 and didn't think, and he didn't realize what that was going to do to him when he was in his 30s and 40s. It is what it is.
Right.
And it sucked for him, because He never was able to really get the opportunity he needed to be able to succeed in life because he made that mistake back then. And you got to figure out how you're going to get on with your life if you're going to make that, not in a bad way. I'm not saying they weren't like offensive. It wasn't like it's like kill or something like that. It was just that's that first impression that people get. And if you don't have your own company where you can control what that does, it's very difficult for some people to be able to move on when they do stuff like that, you know, and it drives me ever since then. Every time I see someone that has like tattoos on their face and stuff like that, it's always to me, I'm like, man, you just like really made yourself pigeonholed into what you can do because of it. And this is a great story of someone who has gone, screw that. I'm going to get all the tattoos I want to, and I'm going to succeed anyway. And it's, and you know, that's a separate part of what you've been through, but it's one more point that I've always thought about since I met you last year, you know, and it's the same thing. Like at first appearance, I was like, oh, this guy's crazy. But as soon as we started talking, I was like, okay, this guy's cool. This guy's cool as hell. Like, no, he's a nice guy. You know, it's just that first impression that some people have to get over. And, you know, I'm the opposite. I don't have a single one, you know, and I love tattoos. I think they're awesome. A lot of people have always asked me why I don't do tattoos instead of concrete. And I'm like, well, because I don't want to draw something this big. I want to draw something, you know, gigantic. It doesn't work this small for me. I need to have all that space. It's easier for me to draw something on 1,000 square feet than this big. You know, it's not how I work. And, you know, the other thing to that too is that, like, I talked to my wife about this a few times too, because she's got a couple of tattoos. It's all cool. And I can't because I'm an artist. I have a master's degree. Like, what would I come up with? And then I have to ask you to do it. And that's my biggest issue. It's like, I don't know if I could do that. I just can't trust somebody else to put my artwork or even their artwork on my body. I cannot get over that mentally. And there's no way I'll ever do it for that reason. And the funny thing to that is, a couple months ago, I was talking to one of my buddies when I first started the podcast, actually. So it was just under a year because I started it a year ago. So it was like early last year. I was talking to a buddy of mine and I was like, you know, I use the same logo, the pinwheel, all of my career with Concrete Mystique. Since the moment I bought that company and started it over, I made that pinwheel as my logo. And when I designed it to do it for the podcast too and use the same image, I was like, okay, I've had this image for almost 20 years now. This would be a perfect reason to get a tattoo. I'm never going to regret that. I've had it long enough now that it's a memory that I'm always going to want to have no matter what happens with my future. And so I went to the wife and was like, I finally figured out the tattoo I want. And someone can do that for me. I'm not worried about someone doing a pinwheel on my arm. That's easy. And she's like, no. I'm like, what? She goes, you can't get one now. It would ruin, you know, like she's just like mentally was like, there's no way you can get a tattoo now. It's been so long and the way that the mentality I have and everything like that, she's like, no, you're not allowed to get one now. It's too late. I was like, dang it. I finally had a reason. So.
Right. Yeah. The one tattoo on my throat, it's actually part of my business logo. It's a grind wheel ripping out of my throat. And then across my throat, it says life is a grind.
Nice.
And then I have my business slogan on the back of my neck. But yeah, like, you know, like back on, you know, judgments on tattoos and how everybody, you know, perceives everybody. I was doing a job the one time. It was a metallic job, and I'm there for, you know, the final sanding and top coat of this metallic application, and got the whole floor all prepped for urethane. And I hear a door shut, and I hear somebody coming down the steps. Well, what do you know? It's one of the judges that sentenced me to state prison. I'm at his daughter's house doing a metallic epoxy application, and he actually, I seen who it was, and I'm like, oh, I looked at my fiance, I'm like, that's the judge that sent me to prison, and he had nothing but good things to say, and then like he ended up referring me to a couple other individuals that were, you know, working for the DA's office, a retired narc detective for the Attorney General's office. I did a custom mixed media broken wood plank with dark mystic water with pieces of wood floating out in the middle of their floor. So, you know, doing stuff like that, and just word of mouth is everything with this stuff.
Yeah,
It
it
was
really
very
is.
humbling
Yeah.
to to be able to be in somebody's home, that somebody that judged me for a crime that I committed years ago and sent me somewhere behind bars, you know, didn't continue to hold that judgment and seen that I turned my life around. It was extremely, extremely humbling.
I wonder how many times he's been through that.
Yeah,
Like I
I
wonder
mean
how many
that's
other times he's seen someone succeed that he put, obviously he remembered you, I would assume, because of that.
cor- right.
So he
Yeah.
knew. Yeah, that's a very interesting story. I did a morgue, basically, or not a morgue, but a
Like a
oh,
crematorium.
yes. And the owner was a judge in town. And so I was like, whoa, I got to really be careful on this. And everything went great. Great guy. Got to know him for a while. He showed me all sorts of stuff. Funeral home and a crematorium. And I don't know why I couldn't remember funeral all of a sudden. And years later, like almost a decade later, a friend of mine had been arrested, and I came to testify for him because his girlfriend had called the police on him about abuse and all this kind of stuff that was pretty false, actually. And actually, he was staying in my warehouse, and I had everything on camera. So I was able to like literally show pictures and go, well, they're having a good time right here, so I don't see the issue at all. And he
Right.
was like, so I got him off and everything like that. Well, it was the same judge. So I'm sitting there and I'm like, I hope he doesn't recognize me. And we don't say anything or anything like that. And about like a couple months later, he drove up to my house, which threw me completely off because he wanted to reseal what I did for him, and he couldn't get a hold of me for some weird reason. So he found me, and just one day I pulled into my house and he pulled up behind me, and I was like, "Hi, can I, what's up?" And he was
You're like,
like,
what are you
"Well,
doing here?
yeah." He's like, "Well, I've been trying to get a hold of you, and I need you to come back and all this kind of stuff." And I was like, "You don't happen to remember, this situation?" And he was like, "No. I mean, yeah, I know which case you're talking about, but no, I didn't put two and two together either." And he's like, and I'm like, I'm glad, because it might have been an issue if the judge knew me. I might not have been able to testify for my friend. I didn't know how it
Right,
all worked.
right.
So we kept very
Yeah, you
quiet
didn't know
about it.
if
And
it
he's
would be a
like, yeah, conflict of
yeah
interest and stuff like that. And
conflict.
so that he was like,
Correct.
no, I'm glad you shut up.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, it's about as close as I've gotten to a run-in with the judge. My grandfather, actually, you'll like this story. My grandfather was a judge in the middle of nowhere in upstate New York, and very, very, very small town, like extremely small town. And he had all these amazing guns. He had like a Dirty Harry pistol. He had a sawed-off shotgun with a pistol grip handle. He had like all of these crazy weapons. And I was like, what the hell? Like, it was amazing, some of these weapons that he had. Turns out what he was doing was, if you came into court and got arrested for something you did, whatever it was, and you couldn't pay for your court fees, he would be like, well, do you have something you can trade? Do you have like weapons and stuff that you've acquired? And he would trade and pay their debt and acquire guns from them. And that's how he collected all of his guns.
That is actually genius.
Yeah. I'm still mad to
it's
this
like
day that he sold his sawed-off shotgun before he passed, because I wanted that so bad. I thought that would have been so cool to have. I had this badass black trench coat, but it's illegal to have one, so.
right. Yeah. I mean, if you think about it, the way that I don't know how old I don't know how old your grandfather was, but if you think about it, that's like olden days. Like that's olden,
Oh,
like
it
my
was.
thinking, like, oh, okay,
This would
well,
have been
you
like the
can't pay
50s and
your bail,
60s.
so yeah, like you can't pay your bail, we'll take your horse
Yeah.
type of mindset.
Yeah.
That's yeah,
Yeah.
that's actually that's strategically smart, because I'm sure that he got them at a very reasonable price, because your freedom's on the line. You can't put a price on that. So
Correct. Yeah, it was pretty clever. I didn't know that for years. I didn't know that till after he passed. I wish I would have known that beforehand. Well, not only do I
right,
wish I would have known that beforehand, but I wish we would have had all this technology so I could have interviewed about all of it.
Yeah, that would have definitely been a good episode right there. Just picking the brain what was behind all that.
Well, I want to thank you for joining me. This has been awesome. I'm really glad we got to do this. We should have done it last year, but I'm glad we waited another year to get, another year of the Floor Wars in and have that perspective of a two-time contestant to know what it was like to be there the first time and kind of help the team understand the level of complexities and of course the judges, and knowing what we expected and how hardcore we were about it. And so, this was pretty awesome, man. I appreciate your time.
Yeah, thank you very much. I mean, like, yeah, just like you said, I would have loved to have been on there last year, but I don't think that it could have been a better time to, follow up right after, a loss and then a victory.
I
Um,
agree.
yeah, thank
And
you very much for
congratulations on that
having
victory. I
me.
forgot to say that. That was awesome.
Yeah, thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Well, awesome, man. Well, you have a great night. Thank you very much for your time, and we will talk again soon. And we'll get together whenever we can again.
Okay, hey, thank you very much, Rick.
Have a great night. I want to thank Epoxy Depot for sponsoring this show. Go to epoxydepotusa.com and check out all their great products, training classes, and all the things they have to offer. Follow me on all social media platforms. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button. Thank you for listening and have a great day.